Hey guys, how's it going? I am here to do the Pumpkin book tag. This was originally created by the Literary Gladiators, and I will leave a link to their video. And I was tagged by Steve Donahue, so I'll leave a link to his video as well. Um, this is just 12 or 13 questions, all sort of based on around pumpkins. Or they're not questions, they're like prompts, but you know. So yeah, I'll just get right to it. Number one is Pumpkin, a writer you always make a point to read in October. And I don't really read particular authors in October, or at any other point during the year. It does seem like around Christmas time, I always end up reading some really fat classic. Like last year I read Moby Dick. The year before that, oh no, last year I read the Brothers Karamazov. The year before that I read Moby Dick. But I don't read particular authors at particular times of the year. I did think earlier today when I finished my ShakeTube video about Hamlet that I might make a point of rereading Hamlet every October. So that might be the closest thing I come to an answer. I feel like Hamlet would be a good play to read every year, and because I read it this time in October when it really struck me, that might be a fun thing to do. But maybe that would be my best answer. Number two, Pumpkin Spice, a work you would read to impress a millennial. I don't know if I would ever read anything to impress anyone. I would rather read to, enjoy what I'm reading. But I think the answer most people would give in this case would be Infinite Jest. It's kind of the 1,000-page impenetrable novel by a white dude that's critically acclaimed that every hipster is supposed to have read. So I guess I would say that if I were to do that. Number three is Pumpkin Pie, a work that makes you think of autumn. And for this, I decided to go with the poems of Mary Oliver. She writes about nature a lot. All of her poems are about nature, and you can see I marked up a lot of different poems there. But because her poems are about nature, I think that is why I would associate this with autumn, because autumn tends to be my favorite time. My favorite time to go outside because it's not it's not hot like summer, and you're not dying of the heat, and you're also not going to get frostbite like in winter or something. So I think that's why I associate it with autumn, even though the poems don't necessarily fixate on autumn, But yeah, but although that being said, winter is still my favorite season because I love snow. And I do actually like the cold because I get to wear warm clothes, and I like wearing long sleeves and pants and layering up. I don't know why I do, but I do. Although we might not have to do it for too many more years once climate change advances far enough. But anyway, we're not here to talk about that. Number four is Pumpkin Cheesecake, a work that was challenging to read but was a rewarding experience. And for this, I am going with Thus Spoke Zarathustra by Friedrich Nietzsche. And this is a philosophical work where Nietzsche, it's written sort of in aphorisms. So you can see all the separate aphorisms there. And it sort of has a plot, so it's sort of a novel, but it's not really about a story at all. It's about Nietzsche's philosophy, and he talks about a lot of different themes in it. It is kind of repetitive, but it really blew my mind when I first read it. It sort of talks about Nietzsche's belief that there's no such thing as good and evil, about utilizing suffering to make yourself a better person and sort of become an ubermensch or a superman or superwoman. So I think it blew my mind at the time. Since then, as I've mulled over Nietzsche's philosophy in my mind, I have become a bit less ecstatic about it. But eventually I do need to... I also want to read more of Nietzsche's works, but I need to reread this at some point and see if I need to reevaluate it a little bit. But yeah, this is definitely interesting. And I read a internet comment at one point where someone said Nietzsche is not read so much as he studied. And I definitely agree with that. I had to, for every single chapter, it took me about an hour, I think. And I had to read the SparkNotes article for it, too. So, yeah, this took me a while to get through, but I definitely got a lot out of it, at least at the time. And next is, Pumpkinbread, an underrated work from a well-known writer, and hands down, sorry I'm reaching down to the floor, hands down is Richard II by William Shakespeare. This is about King Richard II, who, through the course of this play, gets deposed by this man named Henry Bolingbroke, whom Richard had banished from England. So Henry returns from his exile to get revenge and overthrow Richard. But Richard is a very compelling character. He's a very human character, and the poetry in here is gorgeous. It's some of Shakespeare's best, I think, and this is definitely one of my favorite Shakespeare plays. But I had never heard of it before ShakeTube, basically. I'd probably heard of it, but I hadn't heard that it was this great masterpiece by Shakespeare, but it is. So yeah, definitely Richard II. Next question is Pumpkin Soup, a work that you first enjoyed but then lost interest in. I decided to go with The Inheritance Cycle by Christopher Paolini. I read Aragon. I devoured it when I was 13 or 14, and then I read Eldest and devoured that as well in a matter of 2 days. And then Brisingr came out, and I read the first 50 pages and got bored, and then never bothered to pick it back up. And from what I've heard about how the story went, it just kind of went downhill from there. So yeah, that one. I know it's not one book, but it's a series, and I couldn't think of many books on my shelves here that I started and lost interest in. So yeah. Next prompt is Pumpkin Donut, a light 5-star read. And I'm interpreting light probably a bit differently than it was supposed to be interpreted. I feel like light in this context is supposed to be sort of with a happy ending and easy to read and sort of maybe fun, but at least lighthearted, or at least, again, just has a happy ending. And this is not that. This is just light in the sense that it's easy to read, but it's Blue is the Warmest Color by Julie Marot. And this is a graphic novel. It was made into an excellent movie of the same name, but it's about a young girl in France who begins to discover that she's a lesbian, and it basically tracks her relationship with one other woman for several years, just the ups and downs of their relationship, and they have a really complicated relationship, and it's actually a very sad story. It's different from the movie in a lot of big ways, but yeah, it's easy to read for me because it's a graphic novel. Basically, that's why I picked it for this question. But it's a sad story though, so it's not exactly gonna cheer you up. But I think it's wonderful. It made me want to read more graphic novels. Yeah, so next is Pumpkin Picking. Within the last year, in which genre did you purchase the most books? Well, I could say the genre of Shakespeare, because I have purchased 5 books relating to Shakespeare. I bought the Riverside Shakespeare, the complete guide to Shakespeare, a sort of guidebook to all of his plays with plot summaries and everything in it. I bought Shakespeare After All by Marjorie Garber. I bought Shakespeare, The Invention of the Human by Harold Bloom. But I also bought A Grief Observed by C.S. Lewis and Night Falls Fast by K. Redfield Jamison. So I guess I would just say nonfiction. I want to read more nonfiction. I do read a good amount of nonfiction, but I'd still say that I read about 2/3 fiction for a third nonfiction. So I would like it to be half and half, but anyway, that those have been my purchases. I've also purchased some poetry books. I purchased a book of Walt Whitman's poetry and some a book of John Donne's poetry. But mostly nonfiction again. Number 9 is Pumpkin Carving, a work that could have been trimmed down. Definitely Look Homeward, Angel by Thomas Wolfe. So this is about 500 pages, just over 500 pages, I believe. Yeah, it's like just over 500 pages, and this is a good novel. I liked it. I really did. But there are parts of it that there are scenes that don't really, for me, do anything for the book. There are long passages where nothing really happens, and it's kind of like kind of more like prose poetry than a novel. And I got to suspecting that it was more self-indulgent than really adding anything to the novel. But that might be me approaching it wrong, and so that might just be the problem. But I did definitely finish this with a sense that it did not need to be this long. Next is Pumpkin Painting, a book with magnificent illustrations, and I've held this book up feels like 5 times in the past month, but I have to say it again. This edition of the Silmarillion with illustrations by Ted Naismith, and let me find you some. There is one. Oh, there's a glare. There you go. There's one in here in particular that I love. I'd love to find that one. Ooh, that one's interesting. That I believe is Morgoth, and I think the guy on the chair is Hurin, I think, possibly. Let me find one more if you'll indulge me. Well, here's one. Here's one more. This one's nice. The mountains. I think that's probably in Aman, the land of the Valar. But yeah, this is a beautiful edition. I really love it. I really need to reread the Silmarillion. But number 11, Pumpkin Ice Cream, the most random work you could recommend. And I ended up going with Isms and Ologies by Arthur Goldwag. And this is literally what it sounds like. Just a dictionary of different, isms and ologies, basically. So there's minimalism, there's modernism, there's deconstructionism, empiricism, cynicism, Nazism, Zoroastrianism. Oh gosh, I don't know what that one is. Whoa, okay. Look at this word. Where is it? I hope you guys can see that. Well, anyway, it's like Swedenborgianism? Yeah, I need to look through this more. Let's see. The religious teachings of the Swedish scientist and mystic Emanuel Swedenborg, and the tenets of the Church of the New Jerusalem, which is based on his visionary writings. Ardently anti-Trinitarian, Swedenborg preached that heaven and hell are invisible presences. After our deaths, he said, we will choose which one we will live in. Interesting. Okay, well, I guess I need to look through this more. I don't know if it's a book you really read cover to cover, but that might be kind of fun. So, yeah, Isms and Ologies, definitely the most random book on my shelf, definitely. Let's see, number 12, what is your favorite way to enjoy pumpkin, and what is your favorite dish where pumpkin is the main ingredient? Definitely pumpkin pie, duh. Pumpkin bread would come in a close second. I love pumpkin bread. My mom makes it every year for Thanksgiving, although I wasn't at home to have it on Thanksgiving last year, and I won't be this year, but still, fond memories of it. And then Pumpkin Patch. Who do you tag? I'm gonna tag, first off, The Book Lady, a channel that has a substantial following, I think, but she only just joined BookTube. She just did the new BookTube newbie tag. I definitely recommend subscribing to her. She reads sort of Christian books, which is a demographic of reader that we don't have much of on BookTube. So I think that's pretty interesting. So I definitely recommend subscribing to her. I'm going to tag A Journey Through Books, who I think is also pretty new. She has like 100 subscribers, but I do recommend her channel as well. I think she teaches literature as well as being on BookTube, so she has a very interesting perspective. And And she's doing ShakeTube, which I'm really glad of, because it's cool to have the perspective of someone who's taught these plays in the mix. And then lastly, I'm going to tag the Medieval Reader. I think I like hearing her answers to tags. So, yeah, anyway, thanks for watching, guys. Bye!